Terrance, can you see me or hear me? Yeah. Okay. Cool. I see you got. Is that new recording equipment you got there? You got a new setup or something?
It's actually my old stuff from but I wasn't using it before. I was using something else. But after Yas complained about my messed up quality, I had to go get my other stuff.
Well, yeah. So I'm rebranding all my social media stuff. I'm got a new computer. I'm buying a new condenser microphone, doing the whole works now too. So I plan to improve my audio and video quality substantially in the future.
So hey, are you kicking this off, or do you want me to kick it off?
Oh well, I'll just take my position right off the bat.
And
I'll talk.
I was gonna say hold on. Let me. I was gonna say just so everybody knows, this is me and Bronson's no lie second time doing this debate. So second time's the charm, I guess. But go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Okay. So my position is straightforward. We agree on the fact that the reason for the South was seceding was because of slavery. There's no real reason for us to go over that because it's not a point of dispute. It'd be like saying, "Oh, do you agree that the Earth is round?" Yes, it's round. Okay, so there's no real reason to cite evidence of the Earth's roundness, given that we're not actually disputing that fact. So we agree on the fact that the South, I take them at their word. The stated reason was that they wanted to keep their slaves. I mean, it seems reasonable to me. Of course, that's why they seceded. But on the other hand, what we also know, like all the historical documents show that, so that's not something anyone can reasonably dispute. But what they also show is that the North was not fighting a war to free slaves. I mean, I'm sorry, but it's just a historical fact that Lincoln was a white supremacist, in fact, and the Northern cause was unionism. It was preserving the Union, and they were not fighting to free the slaves. In fact, Northern politicians specifically had to distance themselves from the position that they were fighting a war to free slaves because that was such an unpopular opinion that you may be able to find some accounts here and there, just as there are some Nazis and some KKK members in America, but by no means are they even close to a majority. And so that's basically the situation you had in the North, which is why the radical Republicans never even came to power until after the Civil War was over, when maybe later public opinion is changing. You figure, okay, we've already destroyed the South and their economy, so we might as well free the slaves.
I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for you to go full Bronson, and all of a sudden just start spouting some stuff that makes completely no sense to me. But I'll say what I'll say is this, okay? All right. So a lot of the stuff, and I'm not trying to quote Daniel because I don't want to give him the big head by me actually quoting anything that he's actually said. But the thing is this, okay? So when we're talking about what is the cause of the Civil War, okay?
Look, he already wants to vote. See? Okay.
Hold on, let me scroll down. I just read that. Hey, Daniel, go ahead and vote. I'm the pro side. Okay, so when looking at
he just said
we're looking at why the Civil War happened. Like the reason behind the Civil War, okay? We're in 2017. So what we have to do is, at best, what we can do is look at almost like how science works. All we can do is look at the evidence that we have now and form an opinion. And so as we're looking at the evidence that we have right now on why these people hundreds of years ago went to war, I look at, okay, let's see. What does this guy say? The vice president of the Confederacy leaves this nice, awesome thing saying slavery, 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 blah, 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 slavery, slavery, slavery. Okay,
can I stop you real quick? Can we not talk about a subject that's not in dispute?
Okay, no, but the dispute is the cause of the Civil War, and I'm saying that all the evidence is. I didn't say why the South seceded. I said the cause for the Civil War. And what I'm saying is everything out of basically everything out of the South says slavery. That's and that's you can't say it's not a fact. So everything out of the South says the cause of the Civil War is slavery. So it's like, then how is that even debatable to say that, like, okay, saying that Lincoln owned slaves, irrelevant. Saying that the General Lee or whatever, that he was whatever opinion he had, irrelevant, because that has nothing to do with why the South and the North went to war with each other.
Yeah, I agree, and I know the logical leap that you're making, and this is where your position actually contrasts with Daniel, and you may not even be aware of this, but I'll try to explain it the best I can. You are describing the cause of secession. The logical leap you're making, and you probably don't even realize this, is that secession must necessarily lead to war, which is true in fact. I mean, not that it must, but it always does. So that is actually the point I was trying to make with Daniel, which is funny because you're now making that point.
Let me ask you this question. This is a question. Why are we at war, or why did we go to war with Iraq?
Because Bush and Cheney and company made up some bullshit and convinced Congress to go along with it.
Okay, but what's the official reason? Not the reason that people say, but what's the official reason? The official cause?
Weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, now the thing about it is this: when you look at the documents and everything else, it is like basically the global war on terrorism. Yeah, weapons of mass destruction. He's going to do all this and do all that. There has to be a reason, whether we say it's some BS or not, whether us, the individual people. My reason for bringing that up is this, okay? So when you say that, like, some dude, Jim Brown, farmer number 2, and he really didn't care about slavery one way or the other, and he said that it wasn't because of the slavery. That's like me and you having a discussion on why we went to war. Your reason and my reason could be different than the actual fact of why the government says they went to war. And what I'm saying is the official reason, well, I guess I can't call it the official reason, but I'll just say all evidence that we have points to civil war for slavery. I don't know. Okay, what are the documents? What's the evidence that it was for a reason besides slavery? That's my question.
Well, the entire history prior to that point, they had never gone to war, and there had always been slaves. So that kind of, throws that theory out the window, because why didn't they go to war prior? They had always had these slaves.
Okay, and so to tie into that, the fact that the
thing that changed was secession. That was the thing that made war inevitable, not slavery.
Okay, so your thing is, so you're not trying to make sure I understand you right. So you're not trying to pull the states' rights card, which is what most people who say it's not about slavery. They try to pull states' rights.
Fuck no. I mean, yeah, I'm not white. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but no, that's not my argument at all. I know that the South. I mean, well, Abraham Lincoln was also a white supremacist. I don't know if you know that or not, but the South was racist and they wanted to practice slavery. I mean, there's no disputing that.
And so your stance is the Civil War was fought over secession, and that's it. And I'm getting this from our prior debate, which was it was over secession, and no matter for what reason the South was seceding, that the North still would have went to war. I think that's what you said the prior debate, something like that.
And very, very high probability. And you can look at that just generally. Just look at world history in general. Look at any time any part of any country declared independence. What was the result of that?
I understand, and you're going back to basically the war for independence from Great Britain and how it ended up being a war. That was just
the previous one in America's case, but you could extend that back to Roman times and any time before that, and it's still the same thing. Anytime part of a country tries to break away from a larger part, with rare exceptions, especially in the modern era. That's more common now. But especially in history, you're talking about like over 99% probability of war easily. I mean, I'm trying to think. I'm seriously trying to brainstorm like times in history when part of a country decided to like break away, and the only real time there isn't a war is when like the mother government can't wage war with their
Okay,
breakaway
so
country.
all right, so let's walk this back. So we have the Civil War. Now, you say before the Civil War there was a secession, and the secession is the cause of the Civil War. Now, I would say before that, the secession is the huge disagreement about slavery. And that's why I say that this Civil War down here is because of slavery right here, not because the middle incident, which is the secession. Because had this slavery opinion not happened, then this secession would have not happened. Well, the chain of events would have not happened that led to the Civil War. And like I said, and it's so, to me, it's so obvious because one of the most important things that I saw in the Confederate Constitution was the fact that it was forbidden from any states that were in the Confederacy to outlaw slavery. You couldn't. It was like, okay, if you want to be part of the Confederate States, you need to have slavery. And so to me, to say that more than anything else is in the Constitution, that means that was the primary thing for them. Like I said, it all comes back to slavery. That is the root. That is the foundation.
But you're describing the cause of secession, not war. The cause of war is secession. You understand what I'm saying? Or?
Yeah, but you're not catching what I'm saying, okay? Regardless of how you want to say it, like I told you, basically, I'll put it like this. Without slavery, without the disagreement of slavery, then the chain of events that led to the Civil War would not have happened.
Well, it's a bit more complex than the way you're describing because the North and the federal government in general were perfectly fine with the slave states keeping their slaves. You should be aware of that fact. The issue was not slavery in that sense, in the sense that you're talking about. The actual issue was so at the time they had free states and slave states, right? And then new states were just popping up into existence. And the way that so the South, they had a pretty good system going on because each state gets 2 senators, right? So that gave them a lot of power and clout because those Southern senators were able to control the entire government, even with like half the population, half the resource. Like the South was poorer in general, less industrialization going on down there, obviously. So from their perspective, this was more of a power struggle. So and from the North too. I mean, for them, it was also a power struggle because they were like, so why the fuck should these guys down there in the South have all this power? And we're paying like twice the taxes and everything. So that was their issue. Anyhow, these new slave states were popping in and out in the West, and so the compromise they came up with is okay. We're gonna do a package deal. Like one's gonna be a free and one's gonna be a slave, and we're just gonna keep dividing it in that way. And so the threat of Lincoln was that he was actually gonna stop this arrangement somehow, like start vetoing the slave states admission or whatever kind of laws that they would have tried to pass. So that was the threat perceived from Lincoln. It wasn't that Lincoln was going to free the fucking slaves in South Carolina or Louisiana or Georgia. Nobody was afraid of that because that wasn't going to fucking happen. The threat was that Lincoln was definitely going to upset the balance of power. And the Southern senators enjoyed the power that they had, and they didn't want to upset that balance. And by seceding, they were able to maintain their power. And of course, the reason they seceded was forced slavery, but also to maintain their power.
Okay, for me, what it comes down to is this question right here. So I'm going to ask you this question, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for slavery, would there have been a civil war?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. I would say yes. Okay, I'll defend yes because I believe if the question, listen, if the question of secession was never answered, because that is the thing that was answered in the Civil War, not slavery, by the way. The question of secession is the thing that was actually resolved. All right, that's the thing that we for sure know. Okay, you can't secede for any fucking reason because if you do, we're gonna stop you. But prior to the Civil War and going all the way back to the nation's founding, this was an unanswered question. Do states have a right to secede? We don't know. They'll have to try first, and we'll see.
Okay. All right. So I don't think I could be wrong, but I don't think you really answered the question. So all right. So this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for is this. Okay. So when I say if it wasn't for slavery, would there have been a civil war? It's like to me, like I said, that is the foundation, that is the root, that is the very bottom. The first step that led to the Civil War is slavery. Okay, so it's
I respond in the affirmative, I guess. Yes, I do believe there would have been a civil war
based off of
if there was any other kind of secession for any other reason.
See, right there, you went if, and it's like, okay, you can't say if there would have been possibly something else, maybe this. Well now that's you can say like saying okay, so that would almost
wait. Can I make a point real quick?
Go
Because
ahead.
all right, my argument is that the cause of the war was secession. Therefore, if there was secession, even if it wasn't for slavery, if it was for any reason at all, there would have been a war. And we know that because we can just look at history and calculate the probability as being well over 99%. So yeah, surely if some state or group of states decided to try to break away, they surely would have been invaded for any reason.
Okay, all right. So the reason why I'm laughing is because it's almost like that would almost be a different debate. And like I'm trying to think of the name of how the topic of that debate would go. It would almost be something like, would there have been a civil war if for any other reason other than slavery? And no, it's like if it wasn't for slavery, well, I guess I'm on the negative side of that because
I feel like I asked and answered that, honestly.
Yeah, but it's I don't. You're saying an answer, but I don't really think it's like a really strong answer because since then, since the Civil War,
there would be a civil war. Absolutely, there would be if any state seceded for any reason, that would be war. I can confidently say that based on my knowledge of history.
And that's based off of like now with
history.
I'm talking about like with California trying to say that they're thinking about seceding and stuff like that. And we haven't talked about going to war with California and all their liberal. Never mind. I don't want to ever insult liberals because.
Well, okay. Well, two things there. One, modern things have changed. So nowadays, war. So the probability today is less than 99%. It's still greater than 50%, but less than 99%. Because nowadays countries are pretty much set in stone. We have the UN now, and they very rarely fluctuate, but it always involves war when they don't. By the way, anyhow, the second point I was gonna make about I wish I didn't smoke weed right before this. What was my second point? I forgot already. Okay, I'll take another hit. What was it? Modern countries. Secondly, California didn't secede, so of course there's no war. If they had actually seceded, then you would.
So right now, if California was getting ready to secede, do you think Donald Trump would declare war on California if California went to secede right now?
No, I think he'd just send in a SWAT team. I think the governor and some legislators would be arrested, charged with treason. And I don't know if you know how Reconstruction went in the South, but We had military governors.
I must say,
And
you know, I live in the South, right? You know, trust me, I know all about the
it's been done
Reconstruction,
before.
and
Yeah.
like I said, because as we know, slavery didn't end right there. They just kind of came up with a new name for it, and like I said, they called it sharecropping, and sharecropping was utterly the same exact thing, just by a different name. And it was interesting that just now as we were talking about that, and you said for
Oh, Gigi. So Gigi wants me to send her some. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I read a comment. Trying to get smart. All right. Well, I'm trying. No, because I'm really trying to brainstorm. So let's go back to the Civil War and all of human history prior to that point, and let's try to think of a time when some part of an empire just broke away, and the mother country said, "Okay, sure," like the king or the emperor or the or whoever the fuck was like,
because
"Okay,
because
whatever."
this is the interesting thing here. Okay, so I asked you if California tried to secede now, would we go to war? And you said no. Okay, but before that, you
Wait,
said, I'm sorry,
If
I
they
said
actually seceded, if they actually,
if
we have different options now, right? So back then,
what options
states
do
had their own armies that they were loyal to the state,
what
right?
options? Okay, so what options do we have now that they
Well, we
didn't
have
have
SWAT
back then?
teams, we have drones, we have other things that we have U.S. Marshals, we have, other things of that nature, which was not practical in the 1800s.
They had a militia, they had an army, they had
Well,
yeah, they
let's
didn't
say
have the
this.
same they didn't have the same technology. But I'll say this. So what what I found interesting is so I said so first you said that um, you brought up that for a secession for any reason would lead to war, and you brought up history. And then I said, if California was to try to secede right now, do you think Donald Trump would go to war? And you said no. And then so it kind of like, then that's not actually 100. So you can't say for 100% that anytime that anybody secedes, that it's always going to lead to slavery, which was the cause of this one. That led to a civil war, which was slavery.
You just went dark. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Maybe it's
I know
me.
I can hear you, and hopefully I
Okay, I
didn't
can
go
hear
out.
you.
Okay.
I can hear you. Yeah, yeah. I don't see your video though, but that's fine. Well, I thought I already made the distinction between modern times and the 1800s. There was a lot of things that were different back then. I don't know what your educational background is, but mine is in history.
Why
So
are you calling me stupid right now? Is that what's
no,
going on?
I'm just saying like modern things are different than they were back then, So, for example, if the federal government today wanted to arrest the governor of Georgia for whatever reason, it would be a much simpler task to do that. They could simply contact the FBI field office down there in Atlanta and say, "Hey, you need to go arrest the governor." In the 1800s, that would involve first mobilizing an army, raising an army first, then mobilizing it, and marching them down to Georgia. And there's actually resistance on the way because states don't want to be invaded. And it's a totally different thing to say that, oh well, today we wouldn't go to war. It's because we can actually avoid it and still accomplish the same objective. Whereas back then, war was the only real way to prevent them from doing that thing that you wanted to stop them from doing. I mean, if Lincoln could have sent a drone, and just bombed the legislature up, I'm sure he would have taken that option. But that's just not how things were back then. Back then, war was. And Gigi's asking. I'm glad she questions this. I mean, I don't know what her background is in either. But if you want to talk history with me, I'd be happy to give you, let's say, 1,000 examples of parts of an empire or parts of a country or whatever breaking away, and this leading directly to war. What I can't think of, and I'm seriously brainstorming right now, are examples of when some part of a country or empire seceded and the monarch or the central government decided, okay, sure, whatever. And the only times that I can actually think of that ever being the case is when the mother country was actually too weak, like they couldn't do anything about it, so that's why they didn't do anything. Like they had no choice but, like, I'll give you Israel as an example, right? The Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom, right? The only reason they broke away is because they had to, but they were still constantly going to war with each other.
Okay, so I'm not trying to tap dance, but I'm trying to tap dance a little bit because I'm trying to look up a fact right now. But I'll say this. So
I can continue.
Okay, so the question that I had was, all right, and I guess I might have went black during this part right here, but my question was, well, my statement was, all right, so I guess you said that, and I'm trying to tie you down to a percentage on this. So was it that you said that 100% of the time when a state tries to split or tries to secede, that 100% of the time that it leads to war? Are you prepared to say 100% of the time? The reason why I bring that up is because also, and I guess because you said of technology and stuff like that, you said because of technology, like when I said, do you think that if California tried to secede right now, would Donald Trump declare war? And to that, you said no. So
Not
it can't be.
Try. I'm not talking about
Well,
trying.
yeah, you have to. Okay, I'm sorry. So if California came up with articles of whatever, blah blah blah, and all of a sudden they said they're the United whatever of California, do you think Donald Trump at that point right there would get an army and roll into California and declare war on California?
I thought I said this, but
I'm making sure I heard it right.
Okay, and here today in 2017, that's not necessary.
Because
in the 1800s, in the 1860s, that was necessary.
Because they had less technology.
Well, you couldn't just arrest the legislature of South Carolina. You couldn't. It's just not something that you could do. Like, you couldn't do that back then. You had to march an army down there and physically go do it.
Okay, so he just went black again. Hey, Bronson, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Did you hear what I said though just now about
that it was necessary to roll an army down there because it was like in the 1800s?
Yeah, like back then they couldn't, and so now Trump, of course, doesn't have to send in the army. He can send in the fucking FBI or the SWAT team. Like, why wouldn't he use the military?
Okay, so just a question. So at what point was it not 100% that if a country one part of a country tried to secede, that it would lead to war? At what point? At what point did it stop being 100%?
Well, I understand what you're like trying to corral me into, but I'm open. Like, I know you're trying to corral me into some kind of contradiction, but I'm intellectually honest. Like, you don't have to do that with me. I thought I gave the value of 99%, and that's the one Gigi quoted. But to reiterate, I can't even, and I have a degree in the subject, I can't even think of a time in history when it was the case that secession didn't lead to war unless the mother country was not physically capable of waging a war to prevent secession.
Because all right, let's look at this. Eastern Europe, okay? So Eastern Europe, goes back and forth on how they do things all the time. Eastern Germany, Western Germany, and I'm not going to talk about Germany because I don't want to get roped into that. But when you look at other things, when countries split, like between Czech and Slovakia and stuff like that, there's times when countries split, and it doesn't lead to war. Now, right. You have other times, like with Russia trying to roll down and take back over Georgia and stuff like that. Yes, but it's more. It's all tied into reasons and reasoning. It is, and that's what maybe you interpret history a little bit different than I do. But to me, when I look throughout history and stuff like that, I look at it looks at the reasoning behind that and stuff like that. So to me, going back to the topic of the debate, the cause of the Civil War. Now, everything else we do when we talk about if there would have been another reason, if there would have been this, if there would have been this, and if they would have seceded for any reason, it's impossible to say, especially because right now, if a state seceded, we know for a fact that it would not lead to war. So it has to be tied to something. It has to be tethered to something. And reasoning is the best thing going off history that has been tethered to. And regardless of what other reason that could have been, it had to be slavery. The Civil War, it had to be slavery because there's no other thing that is evident. There's not evidence of anything else. Like you can say secession, okay, secession, but what causes secession? It's slavery. It's like I said when I asked you before, if it wasn't for slavery, would there have been a Civil War? And if I ask anybody besides Bronson, because Bronson won't let me rope him into a certain comment, which I know anybody knows that's ever debated you, trying to rope you into a certain thing is not going to happen. But I'll just say this to most people.
Not my position. I'm only
I know
for my actual view. Not
if it wasn't, if the question is this, and I would ask Nelson the same question: if it wasn't for slavery, would there have been a Civil War? And the answer can only be one of two answers. One, I don't know, which is the safe answer, or no, it wouldn't have been. That's your only two options. You can't say.
No, I think there probably would have been one if the question of secession did not was not resolved as it was in the Civil War.
But if there wasn't been slavery, there wouldn't have been a secession. So it's like
that's not true. You can't. There's no way you can say that because think about this. Well, here let me just ask you a few questions. Number one, can you name a time in history prior to the Civil War that secession did not lead to war? Can you just think in the entire world history prior to the Civil War? Think of one example, because that's where I came up with the 99%, because I wasn't sure, but I know I can't fucking think of one, and I know a lot about history. So whatever it is, it's going to be a small fucking percentage of the total secessions from history. That much I can tell you. And it's going to be less than 1%.
It's hard because, and I know you're going to, because in history, when you go back, like prior to the Civil War, a lot of it wasn't a splitting up of states. A lot of it were revolutions, and revolutions are measured on a different scale. Because
is revolution.
It's not. It's not. There's listen. A revolution. When there's a civil war, which is the people trying to split off, is one thing. But a revolution is like, hey, we don't like this president, so we're about to roll up to his house and kill him, and then we're going to take over the country. That's a revolution is completely different. And I can quote you, and I can give you history on the continent of Africa, all about those and stuff like that.
The American Revolution. That was a secession, right? You agree, or would you dispute
that? The American Revolution was a what? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That was secession, right? You understand that, right? Okay, good.
Yes.
So that's what we're talking about here. When we say secession or revolution or civil war, we're describing the same kinds of things here. We're talking about one part of a country or nation or empire or kingdom or principality or whatever the fuck you want to call it. We're talking about one part of that breaking away from the other part and asserting their own authority and monopoly on force, which is what a state is, what government is. Historically, this has resulted in war. The only real exceptions to this are whenever the part that breaks away is actually stronger than the part that it came from. Then they're like, okay, well, we're not going to go to war with you because obviously we're just going to lose, and then we'll probably be assimilated by you. So we might as well just let you
go. Okay. What I'll say is this: there's plenty of times when we're talking about revolutions and secession and stuff like that. There are a lot of times where, like I said, a revolution, and yes, I do know that the name of the American Revolution has the word revolution in it. I'm fully aware of that. But revolution, in the way I was speaking of it, is more like in Somalia and kind of your other places where where a revolution is just to overthrow the government. However, in the American Revolution, the goal was not to overthrow the British government, but to separate us away from the British government. You know, going back to the no taxation without representation. Now, what is important for me in this whole thing, and I keep trying to go to this because in this conversation, we have the ability, we can what if and go all day. But like I said, to me, it comes down to take away slavery. If we're trying to say the cause of the Civil War and was it on slavery, The easiest way to tell that is if we remove slavery. If we remove slavery,
let's take slavery out. I agree.
Let's take slavery out. Slavery never happened.
Boom.
Slavery never happened.
Secession is still the thing that's going to cause the war. Like no matter
why would they have seceded then? If slavery wasn't the issue, why would they have seceded?
Didn't want to pay their taxes. That's why America seceded. What's wrong with that? America seceded for that reason.
There is no evidence. There is no evidence of that.
Right, we might have made up some fancy bullshit in our documents saying, here's the egregious way that King George is treating us, and he's just treating us so terribly, and he's such a terrible ruler. But that's bullshit. It's mostly bull. The T tax was like what, a 3% tax, 1%, something like that. Like, come give me a fucking break. We needed for fucking taxes. Like,
hey, I actually have some, and this will be another thing. And I'm not trying to dig. I'm not trying to go into this right now in this debate. But a friend of mine told me he has some documentation like around like circa American Revolution that led him to believe that one of the reasons of the American Revolution was also slavery. But that's a whole nother conversation.
That is another thing because like the Atlantic slave trade was, jointly enforced. The prohibition on that was jointly enforced by the United States and Great Britain. So slavery had been, bringing in slaves had been illegal in America for quite some time before the Civil War. You weren't allowed to just keep bringing them in. Slavery. And the other point I never got to make this point. I'm sorry, but it needs to be said. There was history before the Industrial Revolution and history after the Industrial Revolution. And this can be compared, like very comparable to human history before agriculture and human history after agriculture. Like that's how fucking big the Industrial Revolution is in terms of its impact on human society. Maybe even bigger than religion, who knows? But the Industrial Revolution has completely changed human societies, and most people who live here today aren't aware of that fact, but the IR changed everything, and that was going on in America at that time. So slavery was on its way out no matter what. The other point I wanted to make is that the North would have been fully, perfectly fine with the Southern states keeping their fucking slaves, because they knew the same. They knew that slavery was out, no matter what, slavery was out, and economics was going to take care of it. But they weren't able to expand slavery out, and that was the central issue there. It was the power struggle between the Southern senators and their Northern counterparts.
Wait, hold on. Did you say that the main part right there was that the Souths were not allowed to extend slavery?
Yeah. So
I'm messing with you. Go ahead. I'm messing with you, Bronson. Go ahead.
I don't understand what you don't understand about that.
No. It's only this, and it's not you. And so part of this, I am not mad at you, and I am not. I'm not attacking you. It's just I think like some of the other comments people make when they're trying to debate the slavery thing. Like I'm telling you, nothing enrages me more. And did you see how Daniel actually lost his cool in the last debate? That was so cool. That was the first time I've ever seen Daniel not just sit there and just.
What are you saying? What do you think?
Okay, no, I was talking about. I know you're not a proponent of the whole the Civil War was over states' rights, and I guess that nothing enrages me more than people who say no, the Civil War it was over states' rights. It's like, oh, dude, give me a break. But anyway.
It's not what I said.
No, it's not what you said. No, I'm not saying you said that at all. I'm not trying to misquote you. But what I'll say is this, and I'll bring it back on target. When you look at everything that had to do from the South side, like I can't whatever, but when I look at all the documents from the South side, if you take away the word slavery out of all the documents in the South, you basically have documents that just say, "Hi, what's up? How you doing?" That's basically what the documents look like with the secession documents and the Constitution, all the little ledgers and diaries and stuff like that. When you take away that, especially the fact that you have those Southern generals who are basically, and I had to say this in one of my other debates, there's Southern generals who are filleting people with knives and skinning them and taking their skin and nailing it to walls and barns,
they're
saying
slave
that
owners, they're bad people. That's not in dispute at all.
yeah.
What I was saying is that the North was okay with the slave states keeping their fucking slaves. That's why they allowed Kentucky, Delaware, Missouri to keep their fucking slaves, because they were fine with that. You know, Maryland, yeah, they had their slaves. The North was okay with them keeping their slaves. The reason why the North fought the war was because the South seceded. The South seceded for slavery. Yes, that's absolutely a fact. They were alive at that time. They wanted to keep their slaves that they had. However, looking towards the future, all the future states would have been free states. So they also must have seen the fact that their states would lose power over time no matter what. So that was also another proximate cause of them wanting to secede, on top of the central issue, which was slavery.
Yes, but you have to look at it. You have to look at it like in I know this is probably insulting you. Say you have to look at this in a historical way, considering I know you value yourself as a historian, but
I'm not a historian. I just have a fucking BA in history. But I'm just saying,
when you look at,
are there any historians who dispute this? Because I'm not aware.
According to Nelson, yes. But let me say this: when you cut off when the North, when you say that they didn't have a problem with slavery, it was basically they tried to cut off the import of new slaves coming in. All right. So they tried to do that because what they were trying to do was give the South time to come up with new income, new finance, new ways of coming up with some kind of way to survive. So they cut off the import of new slaves, and they's like, okay, we're going to give the South time to come up with a new cash crop. And the South is like, oh, hell no. We are not doing that, right? No. We're going to not only keep slavery, but we're going to expand it. And that is the cause of the Civil War. It is this separation, this different of opinions on slavery.
It was the cause of secession, but secession was the cause of civil. And I want to mention one comment here. Daniel he thinks he solved the issue. Like, he keeps repeating the same argument. Yes, it's absolutely right that slavery was the cause of secession, which we both acknowledge as fact. But secession, no, he's putting it in reverse. I'm sorry. So secession was the cause of war. Now he's agreeing with me. But slavery was the cause of secession. Therefore, slavery was the cause of the war, right? That's a central point there. However, it's also just a historical fact, whether you know this or not, whether you knew that Abraham Lincoln was a white supremacist or not. Doesn't matter. It's just a fact. And it's also a fact that the North was okay with the South keeping their slaves. That was not the issue. That's not the reason why they went to war. The reason why they went to war is secession, and they would have went to war for that reason no matter what, even if it wasn't slaves, even if it was fucking taxes or tariffs. You can say, oh, well, we don't really know. Okay, well, then show me a time in history when that has ever happened. Why would it be the case just this one fucking time? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I don't think any historian disputes the fact that the North was not fighting a war to end slavery. I mean, all historians know that.
So look, this is my picture that I drew right here, right? So this is the house. So look, this is the foundation of the house right here, and it's slavery dispute. Right here is secession, and at the top of the house right here is the Civil War. So when we come all the way down here to this bottom, the foundation, the base is slavery dispute.
I agree, but you can't rationally argue that the states would have been allowed to secede without a federal intervention. I mean, there's no historical support for that, and the North's stated reason was to specifically prevent that, just as it always has been every time before that in history. So I don't even understand how you can dispute this fact.
Well, with 38 seconds left, I'll just say that I pretty much think I won this debate, because the cause of the Civil War, yes, you can say the cause of the Civil War is secession. I'll say I understand your point of view. However, the cause of the Civil War is slavery, as outlined
they could have
by
solved
all
that
the
without
documents.
war. If it was just slavery, they could have solved it without war.
Every document says slavery.
War.